everyone had a chance to look at the minutes from our last meeting and the agenda.
I think I had a question. It shows me as not being here, and I wasn't clearly in person, and I couldn't recollect, but it says I made the motion for something, but I wasn't here.
How did you do that?
I don't know. I don't know. That was my question.
Oh,
You were on the phone though, correct?
I must have been.
You were,
I thought
yeah.
you were.
Yeah, and that's, should that be noted that I was
Yes, I will change that,
actually on the
sorry.
phone? Yeah. Thank you. I normally don't speak up for any motion, any changes to the minutes.
So you
I
get,
think you had to because we needed it.
No, yeah.
So that's why
So
you were
we're
making
moving-
motions on the phone.
And I'm glad to.
see, we noted that Mike Norris was on the phone, so we do the same.
Yeah, for Ron,
For
I mean,
you.
for Gary.
Yes.
Yeah, Brooklyn's gonna fix that.
Okay. Hearing that, is there a motion to approve the agenda in previous minutes?
So moved.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
You opposed? Okay, it's unanimous. For the chair, just a couple things I'll mention. Last Thursday, had the honor to be a part of the, say her name correctly, Kylie Hope, and a new facility, which was just wonderful. And Christina was our MC, welcomed everybody. Brian was a part of a lot of other folks. It was really a special time. Dr. Martin said some things that really touched me in the comments, but wonderful facility. It opened today officially, which was a great thing. 16-bed facility in Nashville.
We are very, very excited. It's been a 2 or 3 year long-term process with a variety of funders and partners. It is a regional facility, and we've had a tremendous amount of input from different counties, from DSS and different partners who have been either part of the planning committee and designing it and working that out. Family Preservation will continue to do a lot of communication with from DSS to law enforcement to various people who are involved in these children in various counties. One of our big real signatures we want is that it is a regional facility. There's always a lot of sensitivity when things are built here in Buncombe, and we know the needs are great, so I just always really highlight that. So they are licensed. We're very excited. We'll certainly really keep it a soft opening, but it's age 6 to 17, 16 beds. We have a very great clinical model. 4 of the psychiatrists from Mission Hospital will be overseeing the psychiatric care of the children and managing the facility. So we'll continue to be very involved in it and learn as we go.
Thank you.
Who holds the license to that, Christina?
Family Preservation.
We also had a couple of meetings concerning the Rockwood withdrawal, if you will. Group of CPAC members, we had a great meeting with Representative Dobson. You met with us. We also met with Mark Benton and Cody Kinsley. Had a good conversation with them about it. And I'm really proud of the folks that were there. It would have really made you proud. They spoke up and we had a good conversation. They all participated. Nancy Baker was not able to make it, but Nancy participated. We had a follow-up with Cody Kinsley, I think last Friday morning, and I was on the phone, and we had an hour with him, so very encouraged by those meetings, and we should be, maybe appreciate the CPAC a lot more with the members. They're a lot more passionate about what they believe in, but more importantly, just believe in themselves. So, our next thing is a report from the CEO, Paul Bryan.
Okay. Yeah, my same sentiments on the ribbon cutting. That was just a wonderful event. Rick represented you all very well and our organization. We have it's been a flurry of activity around legislation, and we've given you a hard copy of a lot of things, and there's actually one other document that we didn't copy for you. I finally just decided, I said to Brooklyn, look, we'll talk about all these things if people want hard copies, we'll give them to you. But, for example, for tomorrow, because the secretary's visiting, is this like an annual meeting or something?
We meet 4 times a year.
Okay.
We'll meet again at the conference in Hickory in August, so, and it's a 2-day meeting, so it's pretty
County-
involved.
Yeah, county commissioners are meeting here in Asheville this weekend.
We've got, there's 50, there's over 600 commissioners, 50 are on the board. So it's a big group, yeah, can you imagine 50 commissioners trying to get through a meeting?
No.
But they always stay around.
So anyway, though that hard copy, I know, I'm pretty sure, we met with her yesterday, we had a long meeting yesterday in Raleigh with herself, Dave Richard, Mark Fenton, Cody, and there was a slew of staff that went in and out on things, and they mentioned that she was going to be here, and in particular, the IBC legislation, which is in your packet, it's in the board packet. It's about 35 pages long. It's an awful lot to wade through. I think one of the things that's going to be important to counties is the expectation to create a transportation plan. In fact, Tracy's more of an expert on this than I, and maybe Christina. I believe that is the first activity to be undertaken.
I believe so, and the transportation plan has been in there as sort of a best practice that counties were encouraged to do. And I think the thought was that since no counties had taken anyone up on that offer, they were going to make it a mandate. So it's sort of a transportation plan.
Our transportation plan is call the sheriff.
Yeah, well,
100%, I think, unless I'm mistaken. I think everyone's transported in our county by the sheriff's department.
Well, and there's just
At
a,
no cost to the hospital or to.
right, there's a lot of new language in there now about what your sheriff's departments will have to do when,
Have to do.
yes,
Oh.
when the magistrate issues an IBC.
We've already been doing it.
Well, it's changing, and so they want to make sure that, the goal of the bill is to make sure that hospital is not always the first drop-off point. Now, in a lot of our communities, hospitals are the only drop-off point. But they want to make sure that if facility-based crisis is an option, that the sheriff's officers are attempting to take people to an FBC before they take them to the hospital. So there's a lot of language in the bill that is designed to make sure that that happens, which we have some concerns about what that would mean in our rural counties. And Trillium has the same concerns. There's a limited number of facility-based crisis centers, there's a limited number of beds.
well, the whole point of this is that we raised the question with the department yesterday about, who's going to be educating, especially counties and law enforcement about all of this, and, we don't want it to be all just us. We didn't drive the legislation. That was the hospitals that did. So,
Did they? Well, clearly the emergency room is the inefficient place.
a lot of thoughts about that.
Yeah, well, that's,
Well, the
and
truth
if
of it is,
they're not really designed for that purpose, so we don't have capacity. The CEO of our hospital called me one night at 22, and of course I touched base with your staff and also with Billy's.
How many of those people had Medicaid?
I don't have any way to know those, but they were able to move about half of them in a 24-hour period. I don't know why there was such a backlog. But
Well, no one, this might sound like I'm being, flippant, but I'm not. People should not be surprised that folks show up in the emergency department. We have thousands of people,
it was
there is no funding for their care.
right. I understand.
That's all there is to it.
Yeah. And also our magistrates, I don't think understand. A lot of our magistrates don't understand.
I'm sure she'll speak to that.
I'm glad they're addressing it. I
Yep.
don't have to get any much worse for us because we're already burdened. I mean, we're already taking the entire burden of everything, as far as I know, so.
So there's an awful lot to talk about at whatever level you would choose to today. And these are especially 403, I'm going to call it House Bill 403. Refer to it in its, I guess, form before it was adopted, how everyone else would refer to it. That was the linchpin for all that is Medicaid transformation. And its passage paves the way now for standard plans, tailored plans, the runway. Well, the runway's all real now, let's put it that way. And, I've done a few public appearances, just describing it to people, and it's usually about 45 minutes to get through that at a level of just conversational, so that people can understand the important elements in it. Now, the 5-minute version, linchpin, everything goes forward, standard plan, RFP by August. Figure, by the time, 60 days to respond, all of the back and forth of award notification, contracts. Probably you would see standard plans going live by late 2019. The way they have proposed tailored plans going live is contained in this. This really makes me smile. I think they adopted House Bill 403 on Wednesday. This was due on Friday and the department got it done. So you might think that, I don't know, maybe they do something about it.
Jump-started it.
Yeah. So,
Insider trading.
on this 27 pages are a lot of details. The last page and a half to 2 pages in 403 was about the responsibility of the department to produce a report on Friday, June 22nd, to the General Assembly regarding, literally, it's a page and a half of details about the implementation of tailored plan, and somehow they were able to do it. So, there's a lot in this. One of the things that it talks about in relationship to the timeline is that tailored plans would start the fiscal year after standard plan go live. So if we're saying that it would be 2019 the fall, you go to 2020 fiscal year and then jump a year from there. If that makes sense to you. So essentially, if we wanted to write something on the wall, or we wanted to fix the runway,
That's the runway.
yeah, that's the runway, it would be 2021. We really ought to go back to like the original runway that we published and see how close we were. I'll tell you, awful darn close. It's crazy how close we were to nailing all of this stuff.
We'll take a look at that.
For the archives. So that is real big, broad brush strokes. The big changes in the bill is around the regions, the tailored plan regions. The previous language expressed the responsibility of the secretary to determine the regions, so that the General Assembly was going to just be hands-off and said, every county has to be in the region. Every county has to have a tailored plan. There has to be more than one statewide, and it's up to the secretary to figure it out. Well, in the 11th hour, that changed to being no fewer than 5 and no more than 7. So you might ask, how is that going to work out? And really the best question around that is, what is the actuarial soundness of dividing everything by 5 or 7 versus 3 or 4, which had been the
I
previous
thought, I was gonna
thinking.
say, in our earlier presentations at our retreat, it was 3 or 4, wasn't it? So they moved it 5 to 7.
Well, let me put it to you this way. Sometimes in legislation, things get added that are there to get the bills passed. And I would say that's probably one of those things. So whether or not any of that gets amended when people do the math to actually see what it's like to divide by 5 or 7 versus 3 or 4. I mean, that's just the plain truth of it. So there isn't any, you know, and we met yesterday with the secretary and her staff, and there wasn't any clarity they provided around any sort of thinking about how that could or would work.
Currently, how many LME MCOs are there?
7.
Yeah,
Imagine that.
yeah.
So broad strokes, that's what we got.
They don't want any consolidation, I guess, do they?
Nobody wants to be on the short end of the stick.
Yeah, that's right, yeah. Well, that may make this easier. I don't know, maybe the math isn't good, but it seems like, and I can
Oh, it
see
might-
how they
might
would
make it
vote for it
impossible.
that way, yeah. I can see how they vote for it that way as opposed to the heartburn of 3 or 4. Because that was looking
Well, they were
extremely
gonna
complicated,
putting it on the secretary's shoulders.
yeah.
So we have that, we have a piece of legislation around essentially PHP licensure. It's a technical bill that doesn't really apply to us too much. And then, like I said, the IBC bill, and then Friday is paper. And the budget. And high level on the budget, once you pass out that thing that Clark put together, I'd say there's 2 big things in the budget. One is a recalculation of single stream reductions.
I saw that. And so that's what we got, right? That's what we received.
And
I saw a couple other things. I thought-
And in your packet is 18 pages of the Appropriations
Yeah.
Act. I pulled out the pages that are relevant to
Yeah,
LMEMCO.
that's
so
what
you've
we
got
told
that.
Clark we're gonna have to buy Tracy a basket of flowers or something for
Yeah.
and all of that. This is probably the easiest thing to look at when everybody gets this. Let's just get your brains wrapped around this.
Patrick, what's your name, please?
Yeah, I was gonna. Thank you. Oh my gosh, I need my magnifying glass.
Now, shortly after this was enacted, I'm not sure that the easiest way to understand this, other than to look at the original, the column that is original 2018-19. So this was in the budget, which passed last year, the biennial budget. And what they do is in the off year, they go back and tinker with it. Okay? So Alliance got hit with an additional 6 million. Cardinal got hit with an additional 26 to 44. What's that? 26, 36, 46,
That's
$18 million.
Yeah.
An additional $18 million they have to cough up. East Point, that's interesting. They actually end up with a net reduction. Now this is very tricky because of the recurring and the non-recurring. And Clark, you ended up being on the phone after I had to jump off talking to Steve Owen about his methodology for doing this. I'm just gonna admit to you right now, I couldn't even follow his description of how they calculate it. And I don't know if,
Well, it was difficult to follow, and it seemed to be a little bit of black magic thrown in there. Frankly, you know, they wanted to use some of the solvency measures to reduce the impact on LMEs that were less solvent than others. And so some of the ones that have a lot of cash sitting there seem to get hit worse than certainly some of the others with less cash. I mean, Trillium is the best example of less cash. They got their single stream taken from the BOA.
so the methodology around how they actually came up with the numbers, conceptually, it's what, you know, Clark is describing, and I guess there's probably some factor of reinvestment funds. I mean, it goes to the net of how much money you have, I mean, basically. And you remember us showing you that at different points in time, you know, again, you start off with a big number of, you know, 75 million, something like that. You take out the risk reserve, because nobody can use that anyway, and that's probably $35 million. You take out the money we owe. It's like, you know, you've written a check, except it hasn't cleared yet. Do you really have that money? Well, and that when you balance your checking account, you take account of that, and then you have the single stream amounts that we have to pay out, and then you take, you know, 30 days of cash. You subtract all of those things off, and that 75, I'm just going to use that as a ballpark figure, million, or 80 million we have, we're down to like $5 million. Between 5 and maybe $15 million. So you see how much money there really is. At the point in time where we did the January figures for everything statewide, it was about 195 million, which is quite a bit less than the billion that you've heard quoted by a particular legislator. So they acknowledge that we're running out of money. And there's a lot also in a solvency bill that is part of 403 that is, again, a very complicated piece of legislation. I don't, you know, we really would have to spend some time with you talking about how you get to where you get to. I applaud the effort. It should have been done 3 or 4 years ago, because it's just been taking money. There hasn't been any methodology to it per se. It's been just based on the amount historically you were given. There's no real equity in it, in my mind. But one of the comments yesterday was essentially it's a plan to keep us at the brink of bankruptcy. And that's not incorrect. You know, the amount of available cash that people will have, you ratcheted way, way, way down. For example, their figure for, instead of 30 days cash, their range is, I think, 15 to 20 or something like that. I don't know, Clark, I gave away all my notes already. I mean, it's, how many of, you know, why would anybody think that's appropriate? I asked that question yesterday, nobody had an answer.
Couldn't possibly. County gets below 8%, which is 30 days.
We'll be
And
below
we'd be
8%.
getting a phone call, wouldn't we?
Oh, yeah.
Not a phone call you don't want.
Yeah. And people ask that question too.
I don't understand, when you make the argument about the difference between the 195 million and the 1 billion,
Uh-huh,
and you present the evidence to that fact,
uh-huh.
you make that argument, do they obviously could refute it. So what is the logic behind being able to say that there's $1 billion? And I guess,
I'm gonna let you answer that.
yeah,
question.
I'll ask around. And I know from previous conversations, what is the risk reserve? Is it just cash that has to sit there in case of a liability issue or lawsuit or?
It's not for liability or lawsuit, it's in case we cease becoming a managed care organization.
Okay,
There has to be
so-
enough money to
So-
pay all the outstanding,
So that's
essentially debts, claims reimbursement.
Think about
that
New
part of that
River.
insolvency thing you were talking about?
Think about New River.
Yeah.
Now, only we're a $450 million
Yeah.
organization.
Yeah, so you need, is it a
Hunk of
percentage? Do they want you to keep a percentage?
Yes,
Yeah.
15%. The risk reserve is supposed to go up to, it's 15% of the total capitation, probably just calculated on the Medicaid. So that's why. It's kind of like in reinsurance, you might say, stop loss or something
Sure.
like that, just what Tracy said. It's the
I
break,
understand.
it's the break glass option.
Yeah.
So who's the brainchild for the 15 to 20 days?
I asked that too, and no one had an answer. Steve Owen is a staff person in fiscal research that does the work to, I'll say, interpret the legislation. And I can't say that he has the responsibility for it per se. And I literally asked that question and no one knew the answer.
Might it have just been a phone call from key people?
Could be. Could be. So, I mean, I can stop there, I guess. I mean, you know, each one of these
Okay,
things are very,
that's
very
fine.
big conversations.
Who is the primary advocate for being able to change that whole conversation around what is adequate and what is fund balance and who advocates for the LMEs? Just the executive directors and the boards to some extent, but I don't know that the boards, maybe some more than others, have some political power in Raleigh, but I got the sense down there during assembly that it's, just, they've got an opinion about things and that's fact. And,
Not far off.
no, and so I just wondered, I mean, just like the Commissioners Association, the counties don't have the stake in this that they used to. I think when the board was more oriented toward politics and toward the, and so a lot of them really, just like a lot of them, I don't think really have a clue what's going on. You can't advocate for something when you don't understand it. And so having an advocacy around this that was statewide, to me, would support the argument that the MCOs are making with regard to funds and the decreasing fund balance and operating money. And because I spoke with Senator, was it Van Dyne? I had lunch with Terry in Raleigh and explained, we spent an hour, me explaining what little I know, explaining to her, and she's like, I wish I knew more about this so I could tell them they're wrong when I go. I'm like, well, call Brian.
And she does pretty regularly.
Yeah, I said, call Brian. But I've known her for a while since she got appointed, and
puts a good effort into.
She does.
understanding.
She does, but it's tough down there for her.
Well, she's a minority, so.
And then, then with Senator Heiss, he doesn't listen with the same type of ears that Senator Van Dyne does, so and he seems to have a little bit more leverage right now.
I think that's correct.
Yeah. There were a couple of things in the budget. There was one thing about changing those numbers if somebody moved from one LME to another. Did you see that snippet in there? It's in that budget. There's a provision that if money can be transferred during the fiscal year, if a county moves from one entity to another. I wondered why that was in there. Has it always been in there?
I believe it's been in there for a couple of years.
Okay. And of course, for us, it was that there's a provision in there that there's $1.4 million for Wilkes County.
And that's the other piece that's
Which
important for us to note is that, this was a very, very unusual appropriation act in that it was done as a conference committee. So it's all done really outside of any, I'll say, public process. Members are appointed, they do the work, and once it's signed off on, it's either an up or down vote. There's no changing it on the floor. So that changes a lot of things around how all of this pans out. And one of the, reading it in the media, all the special things that were added. And one of them was the facility-based crisis appropriation for the northern region of $1.4 million. I talked to Gary about that, and I know the gal that beat Shirley.
Senator Deanna Ballard.
She's our government affairs person has been in contact with her. Excuse me, as a matter of fact, she wants to take a tour of the Caldwell facility.
Yeah.
And learn a little bit more about that.
She's easy to work with. I had dinner with her when I was in Raleigh and met her in her office the next day. She's a lot easier to discuss matters with than our current senator. And she just listens well and doesn't try to dictate the conversation. So I think she's going to be helpful.
Now, the issue with this is that, that's a great thing that we've gotten that money, and the language is actually in your packet. I wish that was enough money to do this project. It's a start. As soon as we open the doors, the ongoing cost is going to be between about $2.2 and $2.5 million a year for as long as the program's open. Again, do you know why that is, Gary?
Well, it always costs more to run things than just to build them.
Very
But because
particular
most of them don't have Medicaid,
That's
don't have
right.
insurance.
That's right.
Yeah,
That's
I have
all
learned
that.
that over
It's all
during my
that.
time on the board. It's
Right.
that
So
part.
we
of
can
it.
get fairly well reimbursed on the Medicaid side. On the non-Medicaid side, that's the money that's getting cut.
Right. Well, it's been like that since I've been here.
So if we were to,
So the revenue stream, so if it's 2 point something to run it, the revenue stream is, do you have any idea what the revenue stream will be if it's just Medicaid?
Just a little bit.
Half of that?
So just so you know, and Gary, we're going to be coming back to you and the
Right,
correct
and we
people. But myself
we can have
and Billy West, we are all meeting in Lenore. I think it's in 2 weeks when Billy could meet with us. And Brian Shipman, our liaison to your county, who you know.
Mm-hmm.
And what we're going to do, what Billy and I agreed to, we would go back and just sit in the Lenore office and just look at the plans and get him to do some projections on that and then come back to you and Brian. So we have a game plan around that with Daymark. to just kind of
Good.
dust everything off, run the new numbers, and then hopefully the next session would be with you and whoever else you thought needs to be part of that, and then really look at the manpower issue, the funding issues, and how all that would work. So just wanted to kind of give you an update on that. So that's not lost in the challenges of the funding. I think we have to answer the question.
We can't have a facility that only takes Medicaid.
No.
About, let's say, 75% of the people that are going to walk in the door don't have Medicaid. So how do you float the boat on that 75% of the people that, well, that's where that $2.5 million hole is created because there's not reimbursement for it. But, you know,
I get it, I do.
it's hard to, you
And
know,
when we originally backed out of it, I accepted it pretty much, as face value, and then this comes up, and, I didn't ask Shirley to
yeah.
appropriate us 1.4 million, and I don't know how they picked 1.4 million. It was her and the senator
Yeah.
making a deal, and that's fine, and if we can use it, we're gonna use it. I don't wanna lose it if we can use it. But no, I think it'd be unfortunate for all of us, not just Wilkes, but I think it'd
You know,
be unfortunate for the whole region, and
It's a
so.
regional facility.
It
We need to
is,
be.
and we've gotta get some buy-in from Allegheny, so not to belabor that, but it's obviously very important to me
We've got a lot of-
personally, and
we have a lot of experience in doing these programs, and I can tell you, in every one, there were multiple people writing checks.
yeah, that's what's gonna have to happen
Yeah.
here.
Or it doesn't work. So, that's the part I'm trying to, this is a great thing, but please understand,
Yeah.
here's the reality of what it takes to do a lift.
Well, I've got a good ally coming on board as a commissioner in December. Shirley's son won the primary for county commissioner in Wilkes, so
Okay?
Shirley Randall's son's gonna be a commissioner. Unless Jesus comes back.
Okay.
So Shirley's son's gonna be right in there, having to raise his hand to vote for, I could probably some funding.
What we thought about was
That's two of
doing,
us.
yeah, once we get past these first couple of meetings over the next month or two, Gary, probably what we'll do is invite Brian and you, maybe host some type of regional conversation with
Sure.
those other county commissioners,
That'd be
and have
great.
some point people, and maybe you and Billy Kennedy can figure out who that is in these counties, and try to get people in a room with you guys, and just put all this on the table and do a conversation. Early fall would be our preference to do that right now, so, because, yeah.
I look forward to it. Thank you.
Okay, we're at closed session.
Okay, at this time, we need to go into closed session pursuant to North Carolina Statute 143, 318, 11, 81. In order to prevent the disclosure of competitive healthcare information that is privileged or confidential pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 122C through 126.1, or not considered a public record within the meaning of Chapter 132 of the General Statutes, and to consult with attorneys pursuant to North Carolina General Statute 143, 318, 11A3. Is there a motion?
Yeah, Mike, you have seconded, I guess.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye.